Well, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm really, really glad to see all of you, but you're way far away. I feel like I'm in church. If you don't mind just coming forward, we're going to be doing some dyad work in this first section. Let's see, there's a light right in my eyes, and I guess that's necessary for the overhead. So if you don't mind coming forward, if you really want to stay back there in those comfy chairs, all right, some of you are really attached to that chair, and that's taking care of yourself, so I'm not going to gripe too much. I'm really grateful to be here with you, and I have to acknowledge right off the bat that I had a little bit of a challenge in putting together my talk for this session because I believe deeply in preaching what I practice and practicing what I preach. And the truth is that work environments in general in our culture at this time tend to be fairly driven. And so I find myself questioning a lot. So every part of what I've prepared for you today, I've struggled a little bit with in my own mind. And I just want to, that's my disclaimer right up front, that I am telling you what I know is true. And sometimes I practice what I am going to say to you, and sometimes I too do what I say don't do. The second thing I want to say is I don't want to just preach, and I don't want to just inspire. And the reason that I say that is that Monday morning, you're all going to be back here again. And I'm sure you've gone to conferences or seminars where you really leave jazzed up, and then you get back into your real life, and it bogs down quickly. So the three of us have put together a program today that is specifically designed to carry you a little bit deeper into the reality of your life, where you live, where you make decisions, so that you will have choices after today. So my hope is by the end of this beautiful day, I'm delighted you're all here, you will feel like you've been on a vacation. So that will be great. And my deeper hope is that in a week or two or three, you're going to remember a few nuggets that you can put into practice right there where you are. So that's my hope. I'd like to, just a show of hands, actually just holler at me, where do you all work? Who am I talking to?
Housing and dining.
Dining, all right.
Motor pool.
Motor pool.
Animal sciences.
Wow, all over the place. Okay.
Information technology.
Okay, great.
Athletic department.
Okay.
Student's office.
All right. My Lord.
Dining.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
Administration.
Uh-huh.
Memorial Union.
Whoa. I'm impressed. Well, we have only a few of you, but you are a good representation. All right. So a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. I'm going to talk, and in this group we will be doing some exercises together, and I'll introduce each of the exercises as we go along. You're going to have to think with me. I'm not just going to talk at you. And then after an hour and a half, we will break in half. We were expecting a few more people, and we needed the space for the movement part of this. All of you will engage in all of the exercises today. But what I would ask of you at the break is that you sign up on the sheets in the back and divide yourself roughly in half. I don't know, we have 18 people, something? 15. So put yourself about 8 per sheet, and that will define which group you start with. That'll go for an hour, and then you're going to switch groups. The 2 groups are led by Leah Houston, who is a therapist at Heart Spring Wellness Center, and she will be doing movement-based relaxation exercises, and Abby Terrace, who is also a therapist at Heart Spring Wellness Center, and she will be doing meditation-based relaxation exercises. So like I said, by the end of the day, you're just going to kind of smooch out of here. When you're done with the last one of those 2 groups, you can just leave, but please do fill out an evaluation for us. That's a big deal. It gives us feedback that we need to hear. So that's the housekeeping. All right. So the first thing I want to say is that why is this important? There are a number of reasons why the topic today is a big deal. First of all, work is where we spend most of our waking time. Now, I have known people, you might be one of them actually, who think of their life as weekend to weekend, separated by this kind of haze of work that you do to pay for the house and the yard and the family that you see on the weekend. Everybody's nodding their heads. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. So work is an environment that you cannot ignore as a place where you're doing your life. You're not an automaton. We're not machine pieces yet. And it matters how your work is for you. The second piece of that is that work, therefore, will influence the rest of your life. So how many of you on the weekend have no thoughts of work? Right? So the relationships you do at work, the work you do at work, doesn't restrict itself to 5 days a week. So the influence that you have had during those 5 days of doing work influences your whole life. Your life. Furthermore, conversely, the way you are as a personality, the who you were before you started your job, will influence the how you do your work. Right? Now that's a really big deal, because in that one statement is some potential for change. We'll come back to that a number of times. I really want you to get that, though. Because you, as a human being, as an entity, had a set of personality characteristics before you started your job, you have changeable parts. There are parts of you that can be doing your work differently that will make your life easier. It's a very big deal. The third reason, or the fourth reason, wherever I am in this list, that this matters a great deal is we know now in medicine that stress has a huge impact on your health and well-being. Hans Salai in the 70s raised that as a notion and did some very good research to support the notion. Since then, it is taken as a matter of fact. It's a statement of fact. We have very good data and lots of research that supports a wide variety of ways that stress influences your health and well-being. Cardiac disease, myocardial infarctions, heart attacks happen at a much higher rate in people who are chronically angry. It's a risk factor as high in its potential to do harm as high cholesterol and high blood pressure. And I'm not talking about people who don't just express their anger, I'm talking about people who are angry. We know that stress influences blood pressure. We know now there's a whole field called psychoneuroimmunology. Some of you have heard of that. There are nods going on in the room. What that means, psychoneuroimmunology. It was a big, fascinating discovery many years ago actually, when we found the chemicals in the brain that do the chemical messenger communication, serotonin, adrenaline, norepinephrine, GABA, etc. There's a whole slew of them up there doing their acetylcholine, doing their interneuronal communication. Well, that opened up a venue for a lot further research for medications that we almost take for granted now, most of the antidepressants, for example, and a number of the anti-Parkinsonian medicines and so on and so forth. Relatively new information is that on the white blood cells, those cells that fight disease in the body, there are receptor sites for those same neurochemicals that we used to think were restricted to the nervous system. So what is that telling us? Well, of course, we wanted to know, what the heck does that tell us? What has been found as one simple thread that makes a big deal is that when a person is stressed, when a person is in a highly aroused flight or fight response mode, the immune system is down-regulated. Now, you all knew that, right? You're stressed a whole lot, you get sick? Duh. But now we know it's true because we have chemicals to show how that happens. So it has been laboratory proven that that is, in fact, the case. We also know in reverse that learning deep relaxation via imagery and a variety of techniques has a profound effect on the body's capacity to heal, has a profound effect on the influence of pain and the ability to move through and or experience pain. There are many studies now that have been done in the hospital on individuals who've had surgery So acute, real, recent pain, who've had imagery and who haven't had imagery, and the rates of healing, the speed with which they get out of the hospital, the speed with which they can go back to work, so on and so forth, is dramatically different. So all these things make a big difference in a lot of different ways. So that's the why it matters. And the thing that I want to focus on today then is, as I thought about the work as a whole, I'm aware that there are a whole lot of things about the work environment that there's nothing I can say or do that will fix them, right? So this is not going to be magic. But the piece that has to do with your inner workings, the piece of how you relate, not only to work but to life, that we can look at. And that has a profound effect. Now, beautifully and ironically, when you work on that piece big enough, oftentimes it does have effect on the work you do as well. And you'll see what I mean as we go through this. You'll see what I mean about that. So the first thing I want to look at as one important factor to ask you to think about, and actually let me do some handouts first, because some of you are going to need something to write on, and some of what I say are going to be in the handouts. Just pass those around. Abby, I'm going to leave the evaluation here as the last thing to hand out. But go ahead and keep handing it out. So the first thing I want us to think about is, why have we chosen the work that we do? In other words, what was the motivation to begin with? Wait till we're all settled here for a minute. Almost all of us in childhood or somewhere in our growing up had a notion of what we wanted to be when we grew up. Was that true for you? Yeah. And so we had a dream, didn't we? We had a dream about what it was we wanted to do. And there was a reason for that. And then one step led to another, led to another, led to another, led to another, and here you are doing whatever it is you do right now, in the here and now. But there are many, many, many facets that have gone into that. Some of them inspiring, some of them statements of your gladness in life, statements of your heart. Other of them statements of necessity, statements of responsibility. Some of them were statements of fear. Some of the choices that you've made have come out of a space of believing there was no other choice. And so here you are doing what you're doing because it's where you ended up. So there's a whole amalgamation of the reasons for why we do the work that we do. Some folks, God rest their soul, only do work to earn money, no other reason. But do you know, we just had this conversation, work is where you spend the majority of your waking life. I do hope that's not the only motivation that you do your work. Because work is a potential place for you to express your potential. It's a place where you give your gifts in exchange for money. Yes. So that's the possibility of work, of what work can be. What I'd like you to do is just spend a couple of minutes thinking inside for a minute. What is the reason that you're doing the work that you do? What led you there? Why exactly are you doing the work that you do? And we're going to do an exercise with it, but I want you to get it in your mind first. I want you to think about it. All right, good. Now, we're going to do an exercise with this, and it's called a dyad exercise. Have any of you done dyad work before? You know what I'm talking about? No, 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 and no. Okay. All right, dyad work is a very powerful technique, and it uses the power of being witnessed in what you have to say to come to a deeper conclusion or greater insight about something going on in your mind that you might not have even thought of otherwise. And the way it works is this. You choose one partner to work with, and the very, very important part of this is the partner who is doing the listening. Now really pay attention to this. You who are doing the listening, your job is to be a magnet. So whatever opinions you have about the story you're hearing, whatever you think that person ought to do if they only knew what you knew, just knock it off. You don't get to say it. The reason is that there's incredible power when we get listened to, when we get to say our truth to a non-judgmental person. So if there's any part of you, the listener, doing judgment, you know, like you're ready to arch your eyebrows, don't do that. Notice, you the listener have a very important part. Very important part. Allow yourself to open and really invite the truth of this person. Now, when that person feels like they're done talking, ask questions. But be sure that they are not the kind of questions that if they answer it one certain way, they'll get to the point you want them to get to. You know what I mean? Yes. So this is a very important thing that you will do as a listener. So what I'd like you to do, and then I'm going to tell you when to switch, and the person of you who is doing the listening will then get to do the talking. And what I want you to answer, well, get your dyads first, and then I'm going to give you the question. Otherwise, you'll forget it by the time you get together. So choose who you're going to work with, one-on-one. And do we have twos? Yeah, perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So the question I want you to answer, and just talk to the other person, really let it come out of you, is disregarding the hassles that you know about. If you could choose the work that you do starting today, are you doing what it is you would like to be doing? What you can also add in there is, how was it you got to where you are? Think about it. Think about it. Tell your story. Tell your story. And really ask yourself and talk and hear yourself talking. Is this what you would be doing if you could choose it all over again? And if you can get to a place where the answer is yes, wonderful. If you get to a place the answer is no, then try to go a little deeper and find out what it is you would be doing. All right? So that's the assignment. That's a lot of different pieces, but you get the idea, yeah? Anybody not clear about the assignment? All right. So when I say ready, decide who's going to start talking and who's going to listen. You're all looking at me with a... Everybody wants to listen first. That's really funny. All right. So go ahead and start. Okay. I'm going to pull you back here now again. I'm going to try to pull you back here again. I really am going to pull you back here again. All right, you guys, you can pick this up later. Isn't it fun to start to get to talk about yourself and have somebody listen? Stay in your dyads, because there's one more question. There's one more part of this question that I want you to think about. And that is about the meaning of your work. Now, what we're going to do is carry what we just did one step deeper, all right? And the motivation behind this, Margaret Wheatley made a beautiful quote I'd like to share with you. There is nothing that motivates humans more than meaning. We develop high levels of energy and insight when we are asked to think about the meaning of our work. And it's true. It's true. If you knew every single day that what you were doing mattered, we can endure great things if we really, really believed that, thought about it, had it in our awareness. So I want you to pause first before you start talking and just think inside of your mind, what does my work contribute to the world? Another way to think about it is, what would the world be missing? What would my community, what would my society be missing if I were not doing this work? And just think about that for a minute. What does your work contribute? What is the meaning of your work? And then do the dyad work again, and this will be a little shorter time, but give it some heartfelt attention. And choose who will start talking again. You're all still thinking. I'm going to give you a little more time. People are still thinking. Okay, you ready? Are you ready to start? Do y'all have something to think about? If you're not sure, let the other person talk first, and then, okay, go ahead and get started. I hate to break this up. This is important stuff you're doing. I will ask that you go back to your home base, wherever that is, so that, because I want you to write a couple of things down now to really anchor them. You're not going to have your buddy with you on Monday, so and write down a message to yourself so you don't forget this. My work matters to me because. Closely akin to that, while you have your writing utensil out, just answer this question. What are your true priorities in the work that you do? Given everything we've just talked about, or you've just talked about in the last 10 minutes, the purpose for your work, the meaning it has, and what you've just written for yourself, what are your actual priorities in the work that you do? Yeah.
Priorities of the tasks that you do, or the priorities of what you personally get out of it?
Both. Actually, my original intent was about tasks, but if you're in touch with the priorities of what you get out of it, that's a great question too. That's part of the meaning. Part of the meaning. But what I'm asking you specifically to do at this point is start to create a framework for the tasks that fill up your day, given the meaning of your work. Okay, so what have you discovered so far up to this point? What have you discovered? Yeah, Paul?
One of the things in my conversations with Rose is that I look at my true priorities, I'm really distracted with what I'm doing.
I want you to know I'm not paying this man.
I'm paying you, actually.
We did not, however. Anybody else notice that? How many of you are doing your priorities? All right. A rare percent, a few minority, which is a wonderful thing. How many of you, even if you're doing your priorities, get distracted? Okay. All right. Good. Great. Thank you. We will get to this next, but I do want to hear from more of you. What have you discovered so far? Anything that you feel like sharing or that pops to mind for you? This is not obligatory, but it's good for the group if you have anything to share. Yeah, Rose?
Yeah, I used to think doing something new like title or something like that was important. And I'm realizing that no matter where I am or what I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
And no matter where I'm at or what I do, if I can make a difference by listening, lending a hand, helping someone believe in themselves, by giving respect to someone who's marginalized, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that's what.
And isn't that freeing? That's very freeing. That's really beautiful. That's beautiful. All right. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else have anything you want to share at this point? All right. I'm going to ask you to think then about, and I have a whole bunch of stuff to talk about this, but just as a brainstorming kind of thing, what distracts you from keeping to your true priorities? Typo there. What gets in the way? Telephone, all right, good.
Lack of sleep.
Lack of sleep, excellent.
Too many things to do and not enough time to do them all.
Uh-huh, all right, good. So the pressure of just plain too much to do. Okay, that's a big one, I think, for probably most people. Anything else?
The constant daily battle of trying to prioritize.
Uh-huh.
Because there's just so many, the job that I'm at, there's just so many different things coming in.
Yes.
That you can spend all of your time on the, what I call it seed things.
Yeah.
The more important things, and never get to some of the more important things, some of which don't have a deadline.
Yes.
And sometimes you end up getting distracted by deadline-driven things that may be important, but maybe they're not the most important.
Yes, yes. Does everybody relate to that? I think that's probably one of the very most common problems in our workaday world. Could you all hear it? Could you hear what she said? To paraphrase and add in, if I leave out part of it, all of us really have a lot of things on the plate to do at any given time, some of which have deadlines that may not be priority in our meaning for life or meaning for job kind of thing, but keep getting bumped out because maybe they don't really have a deadline on them. Yeah, that's very, very, very common. I'd like to talk about the distractions of life, because of our work, because this is a big deal, and this is going to be the hard work part of our time together here. Because I also want to say, by the way, before we get off of this, the little blurb you wrote for yourself about the meaning in your life, why it matters, I highly recommend that you distill that down to a simple sentence and frame it, do something, have it right in your workplace where you see it frequently, right next to your whatever your favorite poster is in your workplace, so that you see it frequently. Okay? Remember that remembering the meaning of work will give you energy. It's guaranteed to do that if you remember it. Yeah?
I just wanted to add one more thing to the distraction for me, is other people's priorities for me. That, kids or friends or spouses or whatever it is, that can very often knock me off my own, being in charge of my own agenda, is that somebody else really has some expectations of me.
And that's a big one at work, especially if you have a boss. Or you relate with other people. You know, if you have an interrelationship, that potential happens. So unless you're, even if you don't have a relationship, I'm thinking if you work way out on the Alps, there's something going to happen. A storm will come up. Just when you're about to do that experiment. Yeah.
I have a child, and years ago I started this framework of working with him and trying to decide whether something was a pebble or a boulder.
Nice. Like that.
And he understood that at about age 4. Small rock to big rock. And mom, as the holder, can only handle so many of these. And so I realized, gosh, why am I teaching him that? I need to learn this too.
We always teach what we need to learn. Didn't I start out with that?
What has happened is that he will now learn that I'm going to go work out, and that's a boulder for me right now.
Yeah.
And even your pebbles, no matter how many of them are
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
I'm going to overtake the boulder. And I actually do that with people I interact with. I look at them and say, is this a pebble or is this a boulder? And rather than saying, well, it's not going to make it to my priority list, you know, but I want to know from them, is
Yes.
it a pebble or a boulder?
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That's good for all of us.
It works.
Yeah, it's great.
It works on a 4-year-old.
Well,
that really quick.
I'm going to leap ahead, and one of the things I was going to say about distractions and point out that one of the things we do in our culture, actually, do you mind closing that again? That's a boulder in my eye.
Was that a distraction?
Thank you. One of the things we do in our culture with the way we do our life is we reward the interruption. We reward the 2-year-old in all of us, because within each of us is a healthy 2-year-old and a 4-year-old and a teenager just waiting for rebellion and all kinds of things. And we reward that. I used to work for a guy who had an open door policy, which was all right, except that it was always open, including when you were trying to have a meeting with him. So any given conversation I was trying to have, I'd have to wait for 3 or 4 interruptions at the door before I ever got to make my point. I learned if I ever wanted to have a conversation, I would not schedule a meeting. I'd go interrupt whatever he was doing. You know, we do that. And if there's any part of the way you're doing your work that is rewarding the interruption when what you need to do for whatever reason is something else, look at that and build buffers. You can. You can build buffers. There are many, 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 many ways to build buffers. Another thing associated and related to this is the number of portals for communication that we have going right now. May we list the ways. I'll tell you what, there's cell phones, there are pagers, there are 2 or 3 telephone lines, depending upon how many kids you have. Email, I'm sure I'm leaving out something because Palm Pilots, oh my God, I don't have one of those. You can communicate with those, huh? Face-to-face, oh yeah, face-to-face. Novel idea. There's, oh yeah, snail mail, etc. Now, I remember, I can't get this out of my mind, so I'll share it with you. I remember a while back, I don't watch television for a wide variety of reasons, but I saw an advertisement, it's still in a magazine, I think, of this beautiful beach scene, white sand and a palm tree and azure blue ocean in the sky, and a couple of beach, those comfy chairs that you lean back in, and there was this guy, this gorgeous guy in there with his sunglasses, and this woman next to him, I assume is his wife, with a child starting to crawl up on her lap, and then another kid down on the beach, you know, with sunglasses on and dragging a pail and so on and so forth. And the woman was sort of leaning towards the man with this beautiful smile on her face and thought, whoa, nice relationship. And the man was on a cell phone. And the caption was, stay connected. And you know what pissed me off?
Connected with who?
Da!
That's what I was saying with you.
So there's a paradox that happens. The more portals for communication you keep open at any given time, the less connected you are with exactly where you are and whatever you're trying to do. Right? So if you think, ask yourself, how many of these do I need? You know, and you wouldn't believe the things like, well, I might have a flat. So? I might this. Well, this might. So-and-so might need to reach me, such and such, and da-da-da. You know what? We get addicted. We get addicted to sensation. We get addicted to sensation. We get addicted to ideas. We convince ourselves we can't do without something, and we clutter our lives with all the things we can't do without. So much that we lose track of anything, much less the meaning of why we're doing what we're doing. Am I telling you the truth? Yes. So this matters a great deal. I would strongly encourage you to take inventory of the ways that you're available and how often when you're getting a communication are you really saying yes to that connection? And how often is every cell in your body screaming, God, leave me alone. Just get out of my face. Tense up. One more thing. I can feel it coming. Oh, you. Oh, I can't say what I wouldn't. People who work with me know what I was going to say. You know. So ask yourself that. I have a page of ways we keep ourselves wound up. And I'm going to go through these. A couple of them we just talked about. Now, one of the things I do want to say about the interruption thing, I made a note to myself to be sure to mention, sometimes your job is the interruption. So please don't take this as dissing the telephone operator or whatnot, because sometimes the job is the interruption, and if that's your job, then that's what it is. But I will tell you that if part of your job is to get a task done that involves concentration, or if part of your job is communicating with a person at enough depth that you have to accomplish something with a decision, thinking through a process, then the interruption is in the way of your doing your job. And it's imperative that you figure out ways to buffer yourself. For instance, I caught myself, do any of you have those email blip things that tell you when you have mail? Who cares?
Yeah, I agree. Turn that off.
Unless you really, really, really have to answer every email the minute it comes, ask yourself these questions. Every time, I beseech you to pay attention to when you feel that tension inside of your body of, oh, ask yourself, was this necessary? Was there a way for me to have blocked this or to have gotten to it later? One thing you can do is choose to not answer the phone, not do your emails until you've given yourself time to finish a task. When you're done with the task, you give yourself 10 or 15 minutes or whatever it takes to catch up on your emails or whatever it takes. In my case, it's going to take 3 weeks, but anyway, it's besides the point. Right? You can do this. You can do this. You can block. You can block. One of the things I do for myself is I schedule time at home to do work that has to have attention. I've discovered that's the kindest thing that I can do to really get it done. My staff know how to get a hold of me, but it's a better screen than if I'm actually in the office. Some of you don't have that liberty. But ask yourselves, when you're getting interrupted, what can you block so that you don't get tense? Because what happens is, now I'm going to talk a little bit more about this addiction we have to sensation. How many of you can go without caffeine? Okay, some of you are really, wonderful. Maybe a little bit. Okay.
Doesn't mean I like to.
Doesn't mean those around you. I can go get it for me.
All right. Do you notice the difference when you're caffeinated and when you're not? All right? All right. Do you drink caffeine? Okay. All right. One of the things I observe, and everything that I say is not going to apply to everybody, but one of the things that I observe is that in our culture, we are truly addicted to the sensation of being on, being productive, being sharp, being right there. I saw a man in the clinic this last week whose main complaint was he realized he was overall sort of depressed. He couldn't do without his caffeine, and he couldn't do without his chocolate, and he couldn't do without a number of things. And when we really got into the meat of the matter, what he couldn't do without was feeling primed and on and productive every single second. He also couldn't sleep. I see a lot of patients who have trouble sleeping because our priority is being on. You know, don't let them catch you not being productive, for gosh sake, including on the weekend. What?
We ridicule other cultures.
Yes.
Don't have that same priority.
Yes, that's right. Or one another and ourselves, right? We say, oh my God, what's wrong with me? We wake up after just really driving, pushing, meeting that deadline, and we wake up one morning and we're dragging. And then, maybe not all of you do this, but if you beat yourself up for that, it's like, give it a break. There is not one living organism. In fact, there's not even one piece of machinery, for crying out loud, that can do that nonstop, all the time. Doesn't exist. GMO's on the way, but, God, I hope not. Yeah.
Well, I'm connecting with that because sometimes on the weekends I'll get depressed, and it's
I don't know why, I'm just sitting there like, I should be doing something. I don't feel like productive, those words,
Yes.
productive, on point.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
fine, just like I'm not in my groove, you know. And
Yes.
you're kicking back on the couch and something doesn't feel right about that.
Yes. Yes, I relate to that too. Anybody else relate to that?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. For me, I had to cut out these top 3 things because, I mean, I have to respond to every form of communication, and in fact, I love doing it.
Uh-huh.
I just get a thrill out of that. But I don't need that other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always wondering, well, why don't I watch TV? Well, that's probably it.
So let's talk about TV. Yes, stimulation. TV is terrible for a number of reasons. Number one, the content. TV is terrible for a number of reasons. Number one, the content. So, as a basic, I've got to...
What soap are you on here now?
What? What soap am I on? What soap am I
Are you on right now?
All right, so number one, the content. So here's the thing. In this society where we all get ourselves addicted to feeling revved up and revved up and revved up, if the people who make the shows are going to keep your interest, they have to rev you up a little more. So now we have reality-based TV based on the worst of reality that's magnified in order to get your attention.
Jerry Springer.
Or Jerry Springer. I don't know. I don't watch, but I guess that's bad. Is that bad? That's bad. Okay. So the second thing about this is the news. So if you're watching the news, this is reality-based TV. This is not all the news there is. It's around the world now, you know. So in order to be selected, they have to choose the worst of the worst of the worst and play it over. How many of you, September 11th, were glued to the news? Good. A few and a few not. And how many got numb? You know, you just can't keep doing that. You can't keep doing that. You already know this, so you can't keep doing that. You just can't keep doing that. The third part of it is advertising. Now, have I left anything out yet? So let me tell you this. When I got my master's in psychology, I was horrified to discover that in the several years prior, 80% of all the graduating psychologists were hired by the advertising industry.
Scary. That's just nasty, doesn't it?
They seduce your brain, ladies and gentlemen, and here's what happens. Let me suggest a utopian world. Let me suggest that we were all content and that we didn't really crave or want something. You know, what would happen to the market forces? Right? Advertising is designed to keep people discontented. I'm not making this up. But pay attention. This is what is happening. This is what's happening. So this is sort of the internal milieu that you take to work with you before you even get bombarded with all the craziness at work. So just be mindful of that. The other thing about TV, is this a soapbox?
You're doing well, though. I'm enjoying it all.
The other thing about TV is that it takes up time. So you're complaining about not enough time to do stuff. How many hours are you contaminating your brain with what's on TV? All right, that's all I'll say, but be mindful about that. I was shocked and horrified to read a statistic not too long ago that on average, children spend 3 to 4 hours a day watching TV. That's today's statistics within the last 2 years. That's a lot of time that they could be doing something else. And the context of the talk, by the way, was the rising level of obesity of children
Exactly where my head went.
in our society. And it's a line that goes up like that, up, up. Every single year, the percentage of children who are obese is going up. So, and another part of that is fast food. Now, why is fast food bad? This is the preaching part that I was going to do.
It's just anything good about it.
You know, it's an oxymoron, isn't it, fast food?
Some of those lines.
Yeah. So it's fat, and it's plastic. Now, here's the thing about eating. I really want to emphasize this. How many of you know what you had for lunch? How did it taste?
Wonderful.
Oh, good. You guys are good. Darn, I can't do my preach on this. You're ahead of me. That's great. That's wonderful. So the thing about eating, it's very important, right? Because when we put things in our mouth, it isn't just nourishing the biochemistry in us, right? If we pause and really appreciate, food is a vital link to our life. And if we pause and really appreciate, then we're nourishing ourselves on many, many, many levels, right? People who have trouble with overweight oftentimes say, well, I like my food too much. I'll tell you what, most of the time they aren't liking it enough. Make sense? You need to take your time and enjoy down into the cells of yourself. If you do that, you're not fighting, having a hard political discussion, or trying to make tough work decisions over your meals, you will come back to work refreshed on many levels, not just nourishment-wise. So that's an important piece of this as well. The other thing I think I have on my list is caffeine. And the thing about caffeine really is just to pay attention. Now, caffeine does affect different people in different ways. We know that biologically. Almost everyone, though, is revved up with caffeine. Almost everyone is. And if you feel like you can't do without it, then it's probably because you're addicted. What I would challenge you to do is try to wean yourself off and then use it for what it is. It's a drug. It's a drug. And so if you really need a little boost, let it be something you use once in a while, not all the time. I know when I went through residency, I would use it on mornings when I had to present, if I hadn't had sleep for 24, 36 hours, and it worked. Whereas my best friend, who drank it all the time, didn't. She was hopeless. There was nothing that worked for her anymore because the caffeine had lost its jolt. So it is a drug, and it is effective. All right? So what I'd like you to do is look through this list. Let me see if I left anything out here. The schedule, the schedule too full. That is worth talking a little bit about. Now, a couple of things I just want to say about the schedule being too full. It's probably true for almost all of us. And I will just share, in my life, I know that it's really, really, really hard to say no. You know, it's sort of automatic to say yes and then later say k. So I would just urge you to pause. One of the things I have learned to do is pause. That's all you need to do. You don't have to say yes or no in the beginning. You can pause before you agree. And here's a very important thing. Just because somebody else says something is important doesn't necessarily make it so. Just because somebody else says it's a priority means that's true in their book. It doesn't have to make its way onto your book with that criteria, right? So pause, 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 check in as much as you can, find out if there's a yes in here or not. And sometimes there's a yes and you still don't have time. Well, you can then find a time later. There are lots of ways to do the schedule without having. The other very important thing I want to say about schedule is that the commitments you make to yourself are just as important, if not more important, than the ones you make to anybody else. How many of you have ever broken a commitment to yourself? How many of you have ever not? Okay, good. So I ran into a woman the other day coming into the office who was fit to be tied. She was quite distressed, and I said, what's going on? And she basically had her schedule too full. It was the long and the short of it. She was just couldn't take anymore. So I told her about my little secret. It's called the X. So I have a system in my calendar that if I have a day that I wasn't scheduling anything, I put a line through it. Well, people get through that line. Appointments get through that line. But sometimes I'm really sensing in myself that I'm not going to be friendly here real soon, and I'm going to be living a lie, and I'm teaching stress reduction, and I can't keep doing this. Then it becomes an X. Nobody gets through my X in my book. Nobody. And nothing. And so I told her about the X. Well, that was a novel idea to her. So she went home and talked to her husband. The next day she was all excited. Dr. Wallace, I talked to my husband and he could hardly believe it. We're both excited about this X. We're going to X out Saturday. She was so excited. So here's the thing about X. You don't schedule appointments. You don't have a to-do list. So she did it. I saw her the next week and she could hardly wait to talk to me. She nabbed me in the hall, accosted me in the hall, and could hardly wait to tell me. She said, you know, I X Saturday, and by Sunday morning, I had so much energy, I did my whole week's worth of housework, and at the end of the day, I still had energy. Now, why do you suppose that? This is a true story. I'm not making this up. Why do you suppose that is? She put herself first. She took care of herself. Not just take care of you, but you listen. You honor your commitments to yourself. You let yourself matter as much, if not more, than the people you serve and the work you do. And if you're not doing that, then it's a setup for suffering. You cannot do the best work that you're capable of if you don't do that first, because you can't really say yes to anything, right? You just can't, because if your platter's too full, one more thing is like, all right. It's not a yes, and people feel that. You know good and well when you know you've just intruded on somebody, you don't know exactly why, but they won't tell you, right? So to say yes, to really say yes, you have to be able to put an X in your book. All right. So any other thoughts, any other distractions that people think of off the top of your head? Any other things on this subject? All right. What I'd like you to do is look through that list and ask yourself what of these are the biggies for you, and either circle them, make yourself some notes about this. And let's see, we have not very much time. I think we can do one more. Well, let's see, we really don't have very much time. What I'm going to do is skip the next dyad exercise. So instead, do this. Write down on that page a commitment to yourself to address one or two of these issues that you know are true for you that get in the way of your doing your best work. Write a commitment to yourself, what you're going to do differently, when. What you're going to do, when. Make sure it's a commitment.
You're talking about in relation to this bottom half, things that give us energy?
No, the ways we keep ourselves wound up. If anything that we just talked about in the last 10 minutes is true for you, zone in on that, be honest about it, and make yourself a commitment about what you're going to do differently when. So what we've talked about is the big perspective of your work, the why it is you do what you do. Reflect on, as a basic format, if you are in the path that's right for you to start with, or if there are some adjustments that you need to make. It's important to answer that question in a sort of fundamental way if you're not on the path that lets you be the best that you can. So that's the first most important thing. Most important thing. The second piece of it is what meaning is there in the work that you do? What is your contribution to society, to the world? And one of the things I want to say about things that give us energy is having perspective. In other words, meaning for what we do, all by itself gives energy. So I encourage you, again, put that placard up in your place of work so that you're reminded why it is you're there that day. It's not just to make money. It is so that your human beingness can do something, can share of yourself. It's an important perspective to have of the work that you do. And the third thing we talked about is what are the priorities in your work? You can't really know how to prioritize your day if you don't have the first and second things straight, right? So if you know what the meaning of your work is, it helps you to prioritize those tasks that come at you. There are some tasks that are given you that, believe it or not, you don't have to do. And so you can start to make some decisions that are healthy based upon the deep priority, the meaning of the work that you do. The fourth thing we talked about is what are the things currently in the way that you're doing work now that is distracting you, that is keeping you off the right task. That is exhausting because there's something deep in our soul that starts to get depleted if we keep ourselves off of the path of meaning for very long. It's really important to take this exercise seriously and keep the commitment you just made to yourself. And that's the starter right? That's the beginning. You can do this work that we just did today every week with yourself. Pause and reflect. Am I still on track? Where am I off? If I'm tired, what have I done? What have I said yes to that wasn't true for me? Do this. This is about your life. This is about your life, not just your work. Your work is one piece of your life. This is a big deal, a big deal. Another way we give ourselves energy, two connected things. First is to feel gratitude. Yes? Gratitude magnifies anything it comes in touch with. If this second you could touch into yourself and feel grateful for something, anything, fill in the blank. Feel what that does. Yes? Do you feel it? Yeah. It gives you energy. It gives you energy. It gives us huge energy to remember to be grateful. It's a very big deal. Another thing that gives us energy is to finish things that we start. One of the reasons that distractions, one of several reasons, but one of the reasons that distractions is so exhausting is that it keeps us from finishing what we've started. Right? So you feel your body getting tense, intenser, intenser. So the tension depletes the energy as well and makes it harder to sleep. You see how quickly this cycle becomes vicious, yeah? So give yourself buffers. Let yourself finish a task, here and there at least, and then pause. How many of you garden? You know that incredible feeling when you're standing looking at a row of something that's just come up or that is producing? Yes. You must pause periodically through the day and say, yes, I have done this. Good job. Yum. That's a yum. And that gives huge energy. Huge energy. Gives you energy. Gives you energy. Another thing is knowing what we do matters, so we talked about that. Feeling appreciated and seen in our endeavors. Now, sometimes, people don't see us for what we do, for whatever reason. They might not realize the depth or the magnitude of the work that we do. It's possible to wallow in a little bit of self-pity about that. I'm all alone. La-da-da-da-da. Well, make sure that you feel seen and appreciated, even if you go to the mirror. How many of you can really look at yourself in the mirror? Ha! Really look into your eyes and see that human being who's doing a good job. It's worth it. It's worth it, it's worth it, it's worth it. Yeah, the mirror. Beloved mirror. Feeling loved. That's an all-embracing thing that I don't think, we all know this, yes. And again, sometimes there are those moments in life when to feel loved, we really have to look into our own heart and say, I'm not sure if there's anybody else on the planet right now. What do I think of myself? What do I think of myself? If you do that, it will give you energy, you see, and then your work becomes an extension of what you think of yourself and what you feel like you can contribute to the world. So that ends my talking time. Thank you very much for listening to me. All right.